In the year 870 AD, on the 17th of December, a remarkable event unfolded on the island of Sardinia, setting in motion a series of events that would forever alter the course of history. A Norse warlord, known to his own men as Bastard the Banished, made landfall. Accompanied by a host of 1,700 fierce Viking warriors, their arrival heralded the beginning of the Norse conquest of Italy, the cult of Ines, and the Romanos people. The warlord, Reidar Ulvar, was a figure of particular intrigue. Standing a head taller than the other warriors, and amongst the blonde northerners, the only one with jet black hair. He was the product of a union between a Swedish chieftain and an Italian noblewoman. His mother, Lady Ines of Cagliari, had been kidnapped in a Viking raid 20 years prior. Taken from her home, made into a concubine and gifted to the warlord's brother, the chieftain of Norse, she gave birth to his bastard son Reidar. The boy, Reidar, born in the year 851 AD, grew up in his father's hall in Norse. Lady Ines had found solace there to raise him, and over the years she had adapted to the ways, adopting the local faith and customs. However, she never forgot the memories of her youth, seeing the white beaches for the last time. As the world one day would witness, she would never fully abandon her heritage. However, on a spring day in 66, everything changed. Reidar was cast out from his father's court, considered a threat to his legitimate sons. By the standard of the northern culture, where battle prowess made a ruler worthy, it wasn't hard to figure out why. And to be sent away to loot faraway lands wasn't an unusual fate for young men, often finding the life of plunder just as redeemable as that of the landed gentry. However, fate had something extraordinary in store for Reidar the Banished. Legend tells of a vision had by his mother on the eve of his exile, foreseeing her son as not just a king, but an emperor, the one who would lay the foundation of a new Rome, on the ruins of the old. According to her vision, he would sail to southern waters and seize the 7 hills from its current ruler, Pope Honorius III. When she told Reidar of this, he dismissed it outright. However, on his following raids through northern Europe, his mother's vision returned to him constantly, and he could not stop thinking of it. Reidar spent 3 years pillaging the prosperous ports of Western Europe, even kidnapping the French queen after laying siege to Paris whilst Charles II was on a campaign against Ivar the Boneless, the Swedish king's brother. But in June 870, his mother had another vision. A wolf running on the water. As his own taken name, Ulvar, meant the Norse word for wolf. This vision stood as the last proof needed to justify a sail setting southwards. The same year, witnessed Reidar's arrival on Italian shores. Bastard the Banished had come to claim his fabled prize. The clash between the islanders and the battle-hardened invaders was swift and decisive. The Sardinian lords stood little chance against their relentless onslaught. They quickly secured the southern coastlines where the important centers were located. Meanwhile, the Sardinian Judaics, the powerful counts who held sway over the island, reserved themselves to the mountains in the middle of the island, praying that the Vikings only had stopped on their way east to carry away what they could. However, they were very wrong. After the southern settlements had fallen, Reidar gathered his men for an assault on the Judaics' barricaded position in the mountains. In a series of engagements, his forces quickly gained the upper hand, gradually securing dominance over the land. During their campaign, the Norse invaders had to fight the combined armies of the Judiques. But in an encounter in Tortoli, the southern Judica Gubelnu, was captured by Reidar's men. With this news, as well as his established dominance over the main hubs in the south of Cagliari and Oristano, Reidar had won the south. After this victory had been gained, Reidar Ulvar seized the settlement of Cagliari for himself. This strategic acquisition held significant importance due to the prosperous silver mine it possessed. Reidar recognized the value of this resource, as it would provide the necessary funds to fuel his subsequent expedition across the narrow waters, to the shores of Latium. With the south completely subjugated, the rest was easy pickings. And if the united armies of the Judiques had been an easy match for these northern invaders, their forces splintered and retreat was no match at all. 9 months after invading the north, and 2 years after landing on Sardinia, the whole island lay under Reidar's boot. The conquest of Sardinia not only served as a testament to the military prowess of Reidar and his warriors, but also laid the groundwork for their future exploits on the mainland. The success achieved in Sardinia bolstered their confidence, fueling their ambitions as they set their sights on their ultimate target, the current warden of the old capital, and the false prophet, Pope Honorius. With the conquest of Sardinia complete, the victorious warlord faced the task of consolidating his control over the newly acquired land. To ensure the loyalty and stability of his dominion, Reidar allocated the won territories to his most trusted champions, stalwart warriors who had journeyed alongside him from the snowy realms of Scandinavia. This division of land among his champions resulted in a unique cultural hierarchy on the island of Sardinia, blending Norse customs with the local traditions. The influence of the northern conquerors became palpable as they forged their own distinct way of life amidst the lush landscapes and azure waters of the Mediterranean. However, this was not always peaceful. The life of settled landowners stood in stark contrast to the seafaring existence that had defined the northerners for generations. The allure of plunder and battle proved difficult to resist, even in their newfound domains. Fortunately for them, the Mediterranean coast offered a rich tapestry of port cities, brimming with opportunities for those with a penchant for adventure. Under Reidar's rule, the island of Sardinia swiftly transformed into a notorious hub of piracy, a launching point from which he and his men embarked on daring expeditions. They sailed north, west, south, and east, indiscriminately plundering the territories of Christian and Muslim lords alike. The Mediterranean became their playground as they sought the spoils of conquest, and their legendary longships sliced through the waves. But to Reidar, this was but a means to a greater end. Before him Lady Ines' prophecy still lingered. In a particularly daring raid into the petty kingdom of Gothia, Reidar and his fierce warriors set their sights on the illustrious city of Barcelona. Their audacious attack caught the Occitan rulers off guard and resulted in the kidnapping of the Duchess of Barcelona. When Duke Bernat II heard, he swiftly gathered his forces for a counterattack. Despite his efforts, the battle that ensued proved to be decisively in favor of Reidar. Leaving Barcelona behind, the band left south into Muslim lands, carrying the captured Duchess as a prize. But in a surprising turn of events, Reidar recognized the potential for diplomacy instead, marking perhaps the first instance of a switch in character. From a ruthless raider knowing no law except that of violence, to a duke whose name would ring with admiration across the courts of the Western world. Duchess Folkrade would be returned unspoiled to her duke for a ransom. This act of mercy would sow the seeds of a remarkable bond between the two men, as they would later come to forge a lasting friendship, and then, even, become family. The city of Cagliari, Lady Ines' original home, quickly became Reidar's home too. Returning after long months of raiding, he would stroll the city's streets and chat with the merchants, or go on hunting trips into the mountains with his comrades and vassals. But whilst the years passed, Reidar still kept his eyes on his ultimate goal. But going up unprepared against the gathered forces of the Catholic kings, particularly those of the Carlings, was a fool's errand, even for the greatest of warriors. He had to strike when the Christian unity was at its lowest, and so far, it seemed to go in the right direction. The kingdom of West Francia had lost its southern lands to rebellious vassals, and the kingdom of Italy was ruled by a woman, the daughter of the late King Louis Carling, who by all means was a capable leader, but constantly having to prove it to her subjects to keep them in line, kept her hands busy. After many daring raids on the various lords and kings of the Mediterranean, it stood clear to the northerners that there were many who couldn't withstand their might. And requiring a larger base of resources to fall back on, in case the invasion of Italy would fall ill, Reidar made plans for a series of quick expansionist wars before turning to face the Pope. Their first target was the island of Sicily, held by the Aghlabid Sultanate. The island was known for its strategic location and bountiful resources, and it had endured a tumultuous history, laying often as the central cause of many wars throughout history. Currently plagued by weak governance, Reidar saw it as an opportunity to secure a foothold in the heart of the Mediterranean. A short sail from Cagliari, the invaders landed on the coast of Belarm in October 875. Immediately met by an equally numbering force of defenders. However, when the defenders, made up of mostly local peasants, saw what had come to face them, they turned and fled, their commander unable to rally the men again for a battle. Instead of pursuing, Reidar moved his men east to Messina, where they laid siege to the castle. But for the months it took them to establish, scout and settle in the area, the Sultan had already gathered his troops, and they were quickly approaching to give relief to the besieged defenders. Duke Reidar's 2,500 defenders, versus Sultan Ibrahim's 3,700 attackers. But yet again, Reidar's host proved to be unbeatable. Outnumbered by 1,000 spears, they hardened warriors knew how to use the forest to their advantage. After the battle, it wasn't long before the castle Messina succumbed to hunger. The Sultan's host had regrouped in the south of the island, and Reidar moved his men to pursue. But back home, not everything was going so well. The city had been left in the hands of his mother, and opportunistic people, longing for the days of the Judites, had spotted the moment of weakness. Gathering peasants from all over the countryside, they marched with a man named Nicolau at the helm, to the capital to lay siege. However, as the news had not yet reached Reidar, he was preparing himself for a second encounter. Meeting again on the fields of Belarm, it was again an outstanding victory for the Northerners, losing only a mere 100 men to the Sultan's 1,500. Meeting for a third time in Jirgeni, chased the Sultan's men off the island for good. By now the news reached him that there had been an uprising back home, and Reidar quickly gathered his men to return. Meeting the armed peasants directly on the outskirts of the city, the encounter could hardly even be called a battle, as much as it was a beating. Nicolau was captured and every last rebel was caught and executed. Reidar's host lost, if the history is to be believed, only 5 men. Nicolau, however, would be spared. Despite his poor leadership ability, Reidar recognized in him the capacity for war, and Reidar made his former adversary into a knight to fight in his ranks. On May of 878, 3 years after the initial landing, Reidar set sail south again with his men to lay siege to the Sultan's own castle to force him to give up his lands in Sicily. On the summer of 81, the Sultan was convinced and gave up his claims. Just a month later, Reidar set sail again, this time headed west to capture the islands on the east coast of Iberia, gathering in his grasp all the major islands of the Mediterranean. But this time the Muslim defenders knew what to expect. The tales of the northerners' prowess having spread across the shores, and the local rulers and their men met them on the beaches of Majorca. The battle was over within a day and the Count had to retreat whilst Reidar laid siege to their capital port city. As the city fell in April of 82, so did all the hopes of the defenders. Both of the Count's sons were captured, and in a final decisive engagement on the island of Minorca, the war was over. The 3 islands went to Reidar's trusted companions Einar, Sven, and Sunni. From here the grounds were at last set for an invasion on Rome, at least in terms of material, gold and manpower. The Norse invader still had to secure his standing with the gods, to manage an assault on the warden of the old capital, Pope Honorius III. To do this, the Viking had prepared for a grand offering to the gods. In his raids and crusades through the Mediterranean they had caught many petty courtiers and commanders. Those who could not secure their freedom through a ransom of gold were now subjected to this ritualistic act. In Norse lore, the blood offering served as a connection between the mortal realm and the divine. It was a sacrifice seen as a solemn pact, an exchange of life, for the divine protection and guidance. A plea for the gods' continued favor in the battles to come. 9 men, women and children were slain in the most brutal way imaginable on the eve of sail, and their screams could possibly have been heard on the other side of the ocean, to the 7 hills, which soon would lay under the Vikings' boot. The stage was set for a grand undertaking, where the Norse warlord would unleash his forces upon the mainland, seeking to carve out a path toward his destiny. And in the early summer of 883 AD, the exiled son set sail. Armed with his mother's prophecy and the determination to bring down the seat of Catholic power, Reidar crossed the sea with 3,000 loyal soldiers. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the Pope sent out a desperate plea for reinforcements, calling upon the powerful kings of Central Europe. As the inheritors of Charlemagne's kingdom, these rulers held considerable influence. However, Their attention was consumed by their own bitter conflicts, rendering them unable to provide aid to the embattled pontiff. The Norse conquest of Italy had caught the powerful Catholic leader off guard, leaving him to confront the invading force with limited resources. The stage was set for an epic clash between the Norse warriors and the defenders of the Pope. Little did anyone know that this audacious campaign would mark the beginning of a new chapter in history. As the young Norse warlord waged war against the Pope, his ambitions would reach far beyond the confines of Italy. With each passing day, his quest to build a new Rome drew closer to fruition.
Thank you for watching the first part of this new series. If you like the concept and want to see more, subscribe, hit the bell, and leave a comment. I have the 3 following videos already on the way, but I would love to continue the adventures of Reidar and his dynasty of the Ulvares, if there is an interest. I love Crusader Kings 3 because of its potential to tell new stories about history. Despite the totally ahistorical outcomes that often happen, it can feel as real as history. You get attached to the characters and their fates, whether they are heroic, tragic, or comedic. Anyway, thank you again for watching. I hope you liked it.